Hi there, I'm João Frigerio, and this is iWorkinSport interview. This is where I talk to accomplished sport business professionals who share with you their experience, tips, and advice in order to help you succeed in your career. If you work in sport or if you want to work in sport, this show is for you. I'm here in Zug today at the headquarters of Infront Sports to talk with someone who knows everything about sports and technology. He is the Senior Vice President of Digital at Infront, and I'm really pumped, really happy, and honored to welcome to the show Claude Ruibal.
Claude, thanks. Good to be
here.
here.
Thank you so much for welcoming here at Infront headquarters. Last time I think we saw each other was during the World Cup.
Right, we were up in Moscow together.
We were up in Moscow. You gave a brilliant presentation to an event we organized there.
We had a good panel that you organized. It was great. Everyone was, I think, had a good experience.
That was awesome. Listen, before we start, could you tell us, how your career progressed sort of in sport, maybe even like what you studied and actually how you started work in sport until you got here to Infront?
So now I work in sports and media. You talked about my role here. I run the digital team, the production team. But if you look at my life, I've been working in sports and media since I was 13 years old. And so what does that mean? When I was 13 years old, I was a newspaper boy. So I delivered newspapers in my local neighborhood. I had
Where?
A town called Riverside, California. It's near Los Angeles, in between Los Angeles and Palm Springs, California. So a pretty hot, dry town. But I was a local newspaper boy, delivered a newspaper called the Press Enterprise every day. I had to get up at 5 a.m. to deliver a paper, then I went off to school. But in the afternoons, because the paper got delivered in the morning, I would work at a local sporting goods store. So I was always doing sports and media, even when I was in 7th grade, 13 years old. So I've had a pretty consistent track, really enjoying and being involved in sport. And it's just a passion I've had. And even through high school, through college, and then on to my career, it's always been fairly focused on having some kind of profession around sport.
Cool. And you have a long job title here. You're Senior Vice President at Digital Production and Sports Solutions.
Correct.
At Infront.
Yeah.
What does that mean? So can you explain sort of what your job is here at Infront?
Sure. I think my group, we have about 350 people on my team, my broader team within the organization. Infront as a whole has about 1,000 employees, so it's about a third of the company. And I think I sort of see my team as the change agents within the organization. We are trying to enact a lot of things in the company that will make it more competitive for the future. The history of sports and sports marketing, if you go back to the 70s and the early 80s and the work that was being done there was this realization that you could sell sponsorships to major brands in the world around a sporting event and give them exposure, the boards on the field of play, to let them have exposure and brand association with a really exciting event like the FIFA World Cup. And that started in the 70s,
right?
And then continued through the 80s, the 90s. And there's not been a lot of change around that in terms of how brands market around sport until the advent now more recently of all these social platforms and all these digital platforms and basically the segmentation of media and the fragmentation of media where people are consuming not just on TV but across a lot of different devices. So we're working on helping change sponsorship, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later. And then we're also working on how to basically better distribute content to consumers across more platforms and devices where they spend their time every day. So we absolutely are focused in doing high quality TV productions, like for a number of events that we work with and a number of clients that we work with. But it's very important also to create content that's relevant for the fan before the event takes place, because everyone has times on their mobile device to kind of start looking at things and get excited about an event, either around an athlete or around the head-to-head competition, some history around that, make it more relevant for the consumer when they get to the live event.
Right.
And then there's a lot of time spent by consumers now consuming content after the event ends. Maybe you don't get to see it live, you want to see the whole thing on a VOD basis. Maybe you just want to get a clip or a highlight. Maybe you want just a 1 minute clip of just the goals of an event, or maybe you want to watch a 5 minute clip of the key summary of all the key plays of the event. So it's important to create sets of content that you can consume after the event. And then it's really important to think about distributing that content not just on TV channels, but across all the social platforms, the URLs that exist for those sports and where people spend time on sport. You can see the growth around Facebook. Amazon's getting into sport, all the things YouTube has done. And people that are younger, my son's 18, they just don't even think about turning on a TV and think about catching a game on TV.
I don't even have a TV.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't even have a TV. They're cord cutters. They don't even need the TV because now through IP delivery, you can basically get everything you want. And you don't need to watch it on the TV. My son spends a lot of time just literally watching video content on his phone. That's big enough.
Yeah.
And if he does gaming, he might do that on the TV. But apart from that, the TV is sort of irrelevant to him. It's not a key component for him. So the change agent for us is creating new sets of content beyond just traditional content for TV broadcasters, and then creating new ways for brands to market. And then we're working as a company to develop other ways to build relationships with consumers. So in the past, as an agency, Infront as an agency, we would be essentially the middleman. We would buy broadcasting rights, we would buy marketing rights from a rights holder, let's say the Ski Federation, and then we would sell those to broadcasters worldwide, and we'd sell them to sponsors worldwide so they could have that association with the event, and the broadcasters could distribute that content to the fans in their country.
Right.
Now we have to think a lot more about how do we actually help the rights holder do more than just that. How do we go beyond just being an agency as a middleman and really become involved in the connections between their fans and their participants and the rights holder, the federation. So how do we build sort of this direct-to-consumer offering, an OTT offering in some cases, where they can literally stream some of their content or all their content directly to consumers worldwide or in certain markets. And by doing that, and not necessarily going through YouTube or Facebook or some of the other social platforms, but going directly themselves in something that we help build for them. By doing that, then they can also get to know who all these fans and participants are that are interested in their sport and build a relationship with those people. And with that relationship, they can then market and provide other sets of content to those consumers in a way that they could never have done before.
Definitely. That's definitely where it seems like things are going. Just going back a bit also about your career, because you've been now working with sport and, let's say, innovation even and technology for a while. I think way before you got here to Infront, right? You created an own company. Then you went to YouTube, right? You headed the sports.
Right.
Going back on the path to get where you are now, can you explain a bit better how you started working with that specifically, sport and innovation and technology?
Sure. So I'll go back to the late 90s. I was running sponsorship for football, meaning soccer, at the Coca-Cola company. I think everyone knows what the Coca-Cola company is. So they're a pretty world-renowned brand, and they were deeply invested in soccer, in the FIFA World Cup and a number of other local soccer clubs and leagues around the world. So I managed that on a global basis. And this was like 98, 99. I've been there for a few years. And I had a lot of friends. I was working in Atlanta, and I had a lot of friends working in new technology, the internet. And they were in California, and I'd talk to them, and I'd call them, and they'd talk to me, and they'd say, "Now, what are you doing at Coca-Cola doing sponsorship? It's the internet boom. Everything's happening here. We're going toys.com. We're starting all these sites. Things will happen with sports. You got to get with where change is taking place." And I've always liked to challenge myself in the job I have in terms of going up the learning curve. You take a job for the first time and you're like, you don't know too much and you're nervous and you got to learn everything you need to learn about the job. And then after 2 or 3 years, you kind of like, okay, I got this. I know how to do my work. I know who to work with. I know how to have relationships. And it gets a little bit easier, so to speak. And when I get usually to that point when it's easier and I've kind of fixed everything and things are working well, I sometimes get a little, I wouldn't say bored, but I started like, well, what's the next thing? What's the next challenge
Can relate.
for me? And what's the next thing that I should be doing that's going to push me again to kind of get me a little bit uncomfortable?
Yeah.
And our CEO here, Philippe Blatter, he kind of speaks about it, getting outside your comfort zone. He takes us periodically on team offsites. He makes us climb mountains in the snow. He makes us go deep into caves and crawl through passages this big. And we're definitely outside our comfort zone. But it kind of makes you think and challenges you and pushes you to kind of do things you didn't think you could do before. And I think that's a great way to lead your life. So here I was at Coca-Cola at the end of the 90s, and the internet was booming, and I was having a great time there, and it was a great company, and it was a great experience. But so I decided, well, I need to learn technology. I didn't really know a lot about digital and technology and the internet. I'd used email and I'd done stuff online, and Amazon was just starting them. But in terms of really being in that business, I didn't know it. So this is the first time and the one time kind of in my career that I went outside of sports to kind of learn a new kind of segment of business, which was internet technology. So I got a job running business development at a company called Ask Jeeves, and it's basically was a search company. Yeah. It was around actually before Google, and it was a search engine like AltaVista and the other ones that existed back then. And so I was putting together partnerships for them on an international basis, so building Ask Jeeves in the UK, Ask Jeeves in Latin America, Ask Jeeves in Australia. We were trying to kind of build this internet offering, in all kind of markets around the world, which was super exciting because I spent kind of 3 years learning that business, learning business development, technology, internet, and it was a great learning experience. I was definitely pushed. I kind of knew business development pretty well, but not in that specific X sector. And we also had a search software product that we built and we created, and I even was the first one to sell that product. I sold it to the IOC, and that was their first search functionality on the IOC website, probably in 2001 or 2002. I got a Rolex watch for being the first salesman to sell the product, so that was an exciting moment. So I spent 3 years there doing that, and kind of I learned that part of the business. And then I had always felt, having lived in Europe in the early 90s, in the mid 90s, and really fallen in love with a lot of the sports you can see here in Europe, team handball, skiing, bobsleigh, luge, things that, football, things that you can see pretty consistently in Europe. But in the USA at the time, like, you rarely could see a season at any of those events, much less see much of it live. And I felt there was a really big gap as it related to offerings around what I would describe as sort of the Olympic sports.
Right.
So as part of that, with my technology skills that I'd learned at Ask Jeeves, and with my kind of sponsorship and content skills I'd learned at Coca-Cola and some other jobs I had before that, a friend of mine and I just put some money in the bank and went and started a company called World Championship Sports Network, which morphed into a company ultimately called Universal Sports, which is now sort of part of the NBC Universal system. But we created this destination in the USA, both digitally and on a cable TV basis, to show all these, quote, international sports in the USA.
That was more or less which year?
So we started that in about 2004, and I stayed there till the end of 2010. So I was like almost there 7 years. It's the only job I've had for that long. I usually, move on to something else. But it was really exciting and interesting and challenging to learn the cable TV business, which I didn't know that well, to learn about content distribution on the web, because we were trying to do some new things there, and to aggregate a set of content for consumers in the USA that was differentiated and not offered by anybody else in the USA. And it's content that's super compelling. It's already produced at a high quality level. And in the USA, at least, there are lots of underserved fans who just never had a chance to see this stuff. It just wasn't there. I mean, it just didn't exist. And none of these federations at the time even thought about OTT or going direct to consumers, because it just really wasn't a realistic option back then like it is today.
At that time, I was already following so the company. I was at SportCal at the time, sportcal.com, and been following your career sort of since then. So it's fair to say that you have a very successful career. So to people watching, I would like to ask you, what does it take to be successful in this environment?
So I don't think I'm the smartest guy in the room. I think I'm probably, kind of some key attributes for me that I think lead to me having success, if you call it success. Everyone's view on success is different, but I certainly feel like I've had a fun career. But I think a lot of it's about having, being optimistic around what you're trying to accomplish. So like when we started, and people will tell you this that start companies, not just me, but when we started Universal Sports in 2004, we didn't know what we didn't know. So oftentimes you'll ask people who started a company, so would you do it again? And they'd say, no way. If I knew what I had to do to have the success of that company, I'd never do that again. And look, it was really a lot more challenging than we realized. We'd have the best day of our life and the worst day of our life on the same day often. So
Right.
you'd have like a good moment where you got a deal done and then something else would fall apart. So it was just, you're trying to hold a lot of things together, raise money, run a business, get content, come up with new platforms, negotiate distribution. It's fairly intense. But overall, I think for me, ongoing optimism and the other kind of key attribute for me, two key attributes, is persistence. Again, I'm not sure I'm always the smartest guy in the room, but I will just keep coming back and pushing and figuring out a solution, just doing it again until I get it right. And then the most important thing, I think, for anybody, when any job they have, be it in sports or wherever you end up, is that you got to love what you do. It's just so important. I think even Steve Jobs said that at some point in time. You need to love what you do and be passionate about it. And like I said, from when I was 13 years old, I liked sports and I was interested in media. And it was just, this is a great combination of the two. And I love what I do. I'm happy to come to work every day. I'm happy to work with the team of people we have here at Infront, an incredible group of professionals that are really skilled and qualified and have done amazing work. And there's, for me, I wouldn't want to be doing anything else. I mean, I was talking with my daughter who's 21. She's about to graduate college in the USA in Connecticut. And I was sort of feeling guilty. I was sort of reminiscing on her childhood. And I kind of said, because I'd been starting Universal Sports when she was pretty young. She was 4, 5, 6 years old. Well, maybe a little older than that, maybe 8, 9, 10, but when I was first starting. But I was kind of saying, was I just gone all the time and always working? And she kind of reassured me, no, I got plenty of you. But I kind of feel like, I'd be working weekends, I'd be traveling. There definitely was a pretty big dedication to the work side of things. But I tend to like working with people that really believe and want to spend a lot of time working and achieving success around their work. I'm not saying you shouldn't have a balanced lifestyle and have family and kids and all that. And I really treasure those parts of my life. It's amazingly important. Incredible wife, really understanding family. And we have our moments where we go off and we do things together and have an amazing time. But there's a lot of other times where you're really, everyone's focused now in their work. I mean, it's kind of funny when you think about families today and you go into someone's house. When I grew up, it's like, you'd all gather around the TV at night and watch some show. And I'd be there with my grandparents, my dad, my mom, we would like watch the show together and be on at 7 p.m. and we'd all get ready and it's like we'd have dinner and then we'd go watch the show. Now it's like, if you come to my house in the evening at home, it's like I'm in one room watching, Netflix. My wife's in another room watching, an iTunes movie. My son's on his computer streaming Joe Rogan, and everyone's kind of in their niche. It's not like you're together.
And sometimes you're watching the same thing at different screens.
That's possible too. But you're off kind of in your corner, which is kind of, I think about that. There's not as much socialization going on, but we try and at least occasionally or often eat dinner together, and then on the weekends we do a lot of stuff together. But on a daily basis, it does seem like you're kind of in your niche.
So, and professionally, what would you say was your biggest accomplishment?
Well, I think building Universal Sports from scratch, creating a network in the USA that just didn't exist before, and offered to consumers a whole set of content that just didn't exist on an ongoing basis for them in the USA domestic market, I think was probably a pretty good accomplishment. It's the concept of just building something from scratch. We can all get jobs at Coca-Cola or Infront or other places, and they're super rewarding, and I love that kind of work. But the concept of creating your own thing and building it from nothing is fairly fulfilling.
And I would like to know, do you have a favorite failure? Or something that didn't go really according to the plan, but then I think was important lesson for you to be successful down the road.
Universal Sports.
Same thing.
So, and the reason, it's not a failure, but my learning from that was Universal Sports was of a lot of interest to NBC, because NBC is the Olympic distributor in the USA marketplace. So they took a real interest in us, and they invested in us, and we became partners with them. But they're also a very large organization, and they have a very clear set of strategies and rules and things they want to do in their way. And because a TV network requires a fairly large investment, we had private equity investing in us, and they put in a lot of capital for the network to be successful. But in the course of doing that, my partner and I kind of lost control of the company. We didn't have, a majority share of the company on the board, and we couldn't sort of make all the decisions anymore. They were starting being made by NBC and being made by our investors. And, they were probably the right decisions for them, but they weren't necessarily the right decisions for me and my partner in the way we wanted to run the business or the way we wanted to grow the business. So kind of the lesson for me is, if you can build a business and maintain control so that you can kind of, fulfill your vision, that's really important. Universal Sports, I think, still exists as the Olympic channel in the USA, and there's certainly still opportunities to see that content and do some of the things we did, but it's not as kind of a unique offering as I would have liked it to be, and it's not as full an offering that they don't really, offer these sports, all these sports on the Universal Sports platform now in the USA or on the Olympic channel now. But it's, I'm sort of being dramatic that it was a failure. It just wasn't a failure, but it wasn't kind of, my vision in terms of where I would have liked to have left as a legacy.
Hi there. I hope you liked this first part of the interview with Claude Ruibal. If you did, don't be shy. Give us that like, share with your friends, subscribe to the channel, and make sure you click on the bell sign to receive notifications when we publish new videos. The second part of the interview will be up very soon. In it, Claude will talk about the trends in digital for sports in 2019, what he looks for in candidates when he's hiring, and more. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you soon.